Welcome to your deep dive into emotional intelligence. You provided some excerpts from Travis Bradberry's Emotional Intelligence Habits,
hmm
and we're going to extract the most fascinating nuggets for you. Think of this as your shortcut to understanding not just what emotional intelligence is, but how you can actually apply it to your life.
I love that approach. It's not just about knowing the terms, but understanding how they play out in the real world.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. Bradberry kicks off his book with this captivating story about Phineas Gage, this railroad worker from the 1800s. He had this horrific accident where an iron rod went through his skull, damaging his frontal lobe.
Ah, yes, Phineas Gage, a classic case study. The fascinating thing is, he survived the accident, but his personality underwent a complete transformation.
It's almost like something out of a sci-fi movie, right?
Yeah.
This once responsible, level-headed guy became impulsive and prone to outbursts. What's really striking is that this one brain injury completely flipped his personality.
It really highlights the crucial role the frontal lobe plays in emotional regulation and behavior. And this is where emotional intelligence comes in. Understanding how our brains work, how emotions shape our actions. That's the foundation of EQ. It's not just about being nice, it's about understanding the powerful forces at play within us.
That's a great point. This isn't just a feel-good topic. It's about understanding the neuroscience behind our emotions.
Mm.
And Bradbury argues that having a high EQ isn't just about reacting well in a crisis. It can benefit us every single day. So how do we even recognize high EQ, both in ourselves and in others?
Bradbury outlines several habits that emotionally intelligent people demonstrate. One that stands out is having a robust emotional vocabulary. It's not just about saying, I feel good or I feel bad. It's about being able to pinpoint those subtle variations in your emotions. Instead of, I'm stressed, maybe you're feeling overwhelmed or anxious, or maybe even a little bit excited about the challenge.
It reminds me of that saying, name it to tame it. By being more specific with our language, we're not just labeling the emotion. We're starting to understand the nuances of what we're feeling, which can be a powerful tool for managing those feelings. So I'm starting to feel overwhelmed instead of spiraling. I can say, okay, this is overwhelm. I know what to do with this.
Exactly. And that self-awareness is key. Another interesting thing Bradbury points out is that people with high EQ often feel misunderstood.
Really? That seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
You'd think they'd be masters of communication.
They are good communicators, but they're also very attuned to how their message is being received. They can sense when someone isn't grasping their point and will adjust their style to ensure clarity. It's almost like having a built-in feedback system. They're not just talking at people, they're engaging in a real exchange.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just about expressing yourself eloquently. It's about connecting with the other person, making sure your message is landing as intended. So you're not just speaking, you're also actively listening and responding to those subtle cues. Now, Bradbury also talks about emotional triggers. I'm curious, how can understanding those triggers help us develop higher EQ?
Emotionally intelligent people are highly aware of their triggers, those things that set them off. Maybe it's a certain tone of voice or a specific topic or even just being hungry. They recognize these triggers and can proactively manage situations to avoid a knee-jerk reaction.
So instead of just exploding when your boss uses that condescending tone, you're able to step back and say, okay, this is my trigger. I'm not going to let it control me. It's about that pause, that moment of choice where you decide how you want to respond rather than just reacting. Now, Bradbury dives deep into the science of stress and its impact on EQ. What are some of the key takeaways there?
He cites some pretty fascinating research on how chronic stress actually shrinks the brain's self-control center, making it harder to manage those very emotions that stress triggers. It becomes this vicious cycle.
So the more stressed we are, the less equipped we are to handle stress. That's not exactly encouraging,
Yeah.
but I'm guessing he has some strategies for breaking that cycle.
Absolutely. And one of his biggest recommendations is good sleep hygiene. He goes into the science behind sleep and its impact on everything from emotional regulation to decision making. Getting enough quality sleep is essential for keeping those stress levels in check and boosting your EQ.
Which makes total sense. We all know how cranky and irritable we can be when we're sleep deprived. It's like our emotional resilience goes out the window. But here's where it gets really interesting. Bradbury also talks about a study that found moderate intermittent stress can actually be beneficial for the brain.
That's right. Short bursts of stress can actually stimulate brain cell growth and enhance cognitive function. It's that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger concept applied to neuroscience.
So it's all about finding that balance. A little bit of stress can be a good thing, keeping us sharp and motivated, but chronic stress is detrimental to our well-being and our EQ. Now, Bradbury makes a fascinating connection between likability and emotional intelligence. Tell me more about that.
He highlights a UCLA study where participants rated hundreds of adjectives based on likability. The top traits weren't things like attractiveness or intelligence, but rather sincerity, transparency, and the ability to understand others.
So it's not about superficial charm or trying to impress everyone.
Ah,
It's about genuine human connection and empathy, which are core components of emotional intelligence.
exactly. And he goes on to explore the habits of ultra-likable people, and some of his points are quite counterintuitive.
I'm intrigued. Tell me, what are some of those surprising habits?
One is that they don't seek attention. They're not constantly trying to be the center of the conversation or prove their worth. They win people over through genuine kindness and consideration. It's about those subtle acts of connection, like remembering someone's birthday or offering a helping hand.
So it's not about being the life of the party. It's about being the kind of person people feel comfortable and safe around. And I bet that ties into the next habit, which is being open-minded, right?
Exactly. Ultra likable people are receptive to different perspectives, even if they don't agree with them. They're willing to see the world through other people's eyes, to step outside their own bubble and understand where someone else is coming from.
It's that willingness to engage in meaningful dialogue, to have those sometimes uncomfortable conversations where you're challenging your own assumptions and expanding your worldview. That takes a certain level of empathy and self-awareness.
And it brings us to another fascinating point. Bradbury makes the science behind our need for social connection.
Okay, I'm all ears. This is where it gets really interesting.
He highlights research showing that feeling socially connected is as fundamental a human need as food, shelter, and water. We literally experience social pain like the loss of a relationship in the same part of the brain that processes physical pain.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It really underscores the importance of nurturing our relationships and creating those strong social bonds. We're wired for connection.
Yeah.
But that makes me think about the flip side. What happens when we're surrounded by toxic people? How does that impact our EQ?
That's a great question, and it's something Bradbury delves into in detail. He argues that toxic people are a test of our emotional intelligence. They can drain our energy, trigger our insecurities, and even make us question our own sanity.
It's like they're throwing all this emotional baggage at us, and we have to figure out how to navigate that without losing ourselves in the process.
Exactly. And he breaks down the different types of toxic people so we can better understand their tactics and how to protect ourselves.
So tell me, what are some of those toxic types we need to be aware of?
Well, one classic type is the manipulator.
The puppeteer pulling strings to get their way.
Exactly. And to illustrate how manipulative tactics work, he uses the Facebook experiment you provided as a real-world example. Remember, in that study, researchers manipulated users' news feeds to show either positive or negative stories, and it actually impacted the users' moods.
That's a little bit terrifying, to be
Yeah.
honest. It highlights just how susceptible we are to outside influences, even without realizing it.
That's exactly what manipulators prey on: our vulnerabilities, our insecurities, our desire to please. They use subtle tactics to control our emotions and behaviors for their own gain. And it can be incredibly difficult to recognize when it's happening because they often do it under the guise of being helpful or concerned.
It's like emotional camouflage. They're blending in with our good intentions, making it even harder to spot their true motives. So how do we protect ourselves from these emotional predators?
Well, one key strategy Bradbury emphasizes is setting boundaries. It's about being clear about what you will and will not tolerate and enforcing those boundaries assertively without getting into a power struggle.
It's about recognizing that you have the right to protect your emotional well-being, to say no to those demands or requests that feel draining or manipulative. It's about establishing those healthy limits so you're not constantly giving away your energy to people who don't have your best interests at heart.
Exactly. And it's a skill that takes practice, but it's essential for navigating those tricky relationships.
And I bet it ties into another habit. Bradbury mentions staying aware of your own emotional state when interacting with a toxic person. It's about noticing those subtle shifts in your mood, those feelings of tension or anxiety that signal you're being pulled into their emotional vortex.
Precisely. It's about recognizing those warning signs and taking steps to regain your composure before you react impulsively. Because once you get sucked into their drama, it's much harder to think clearly and act rationally.
It's like that saying, don't wrestle with the pig. You both get dirty, but the pig enjoys it.
Exactly. Sometimes the best strategy is to simply disengage, to step away from the toxic interaction before you get pulled into their negativity.
So we've talked about the manipulator. What are some other toxic types Bradbury identifies?
He also talks about the narcissist, the type who thrives on attention and admiration. They have this inflated sense of self-importance and a constant need to be the center of attention.
The me, myself, and I crew. I think we all know a few of those.
Bradbury explains that their arrogance often masks deep-seated insecurity.
That's an interesting point. It's not just about being annoyingly self-centered. There's actually a vulnerability underneath that bravado.
Exactly. And because their self-worth is so fragile, they're constantly seeking external validation, which can lead to manipulative behaviors and a disregard for the needs of others.
And then there's a psychopath, which is a whole other level of toxic.
He does issue a warning about this type, describing them as individuals who derive satisfaction from other people's pain. Fortunately, their intentions are often easier to spot, making it easier to distance yourself.
Good point. It's all about protecting your emotional well-being. Are there any other types he mentions?
Yes, the last one is the judgmental type.
Oh, I know those folks all too well. The ones who always have an opinion on everything, and it's rarely positive.
Precisely. They're quick to criticize and make you feel bad about your passions and interests.
So we have the manipulative, the narcissistic, the psychopath, and the judgmental.
That's quite a lineup. I'm guessing Bradberry has some strategies for dealing with these folks.
He does. He offers some practical advice for protecting yourself from their negative influence, but we'll save those for the next segment.
Okay, you've officially piqued my curiosity. I'm ready to learn those strategies. Now, after all that talk about negativity, let's switch gears and talk about something a little more uplifting. Happiness.
That's a great transition. Bradberry has a very interesting perspective on happiness.
I'm all ears.
He focuses on cultivating lasting life satisfaction, not just chasing those fleeting pleasures.
So it's about finding that deeper sense of contentment and fulfillment that isn't dependent on external circumstances or achieving some arbitrary goal. It's about cultivating happiness from within. Exactly, and he debunks this common misconception that major life events dictate our happiness. He calls it impact bias.
Impact bias, I like that term.
Yeah.
So it's like that belief that if only you got that promotion or won the lottery or found the perfect partner, then you'd finally be happy.
Exactly. But he cites research showing that this happiness from major events is often short-lived. Think about it. How many times have you thought, if I could just achieve this one thing, then I'll be happy? Only to find that once you achieve it, you're still searching for that next thing.
That's a classic example of the hedonic treadmill. We're constantly chasing that next high, that next achievement, but it never really brings us lasting happiness.
He also emphasizes that true happiness comes from within and is cultivated through specific habits and mindsets.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are some of those magical happiness habits?
One key habit is accepting the past and the uncertainty of the future.
That sounds very zen. Letting go of regrets and worries. Easier said than done, I'm sure.
It takes practice, but it's about recognizing that dwelling on the past or fretting about the future only robs you of happiness in the present moment.
It's about choosing to focus on what you can control, which is your attitude, your actions, and your choices in the present moment.
Exactly. And he also points out some thought patterns that tend to sabotage happiness.
Okay, like what I'm always up for identifying my self-sabotaging tendencies.
One is blowing things out of proportion. Like when a minor setback happens and you catastrophize thinking your whole day or week is ruined.
Oh, I'm totally guilty of that one.
That's
It's like that one, spilled coffee in the morning sets the tone for the entire day.
He encourages readers to keep things in perspective. It's about recognizing that setbacks are temporary and don't have to define your entire experience.
Right. It's about choosing to reframe those setbacks as learning opportunities or simply blips on the radar. What are some other happiness-zapping thought patterns he mentions?
Another one is seeing yourself as a victim, playing the blame game and feeling powerless to change your circumstances.
Ah, yes, the woe is me mentality. That can be a real happiness killer.
He points out that this fosters a sense of helplessness and prevents you from taking action to improve your situation.
So it's about taking ownership of your life, even when things are tough, and recognizing that you have the power to make choices that can lead to greater happiness. And I bet this ties into his advice about prioritizing experiences over possessions, right?
You got it. He argues that investing in experiences rather than material things leads to more lasting happiness.
So that trip to Italy is a better investment than that fancy new car. Sign me up.
He explains that experiences create anticipation are fleeting, which is a good thing, and their value increases over time.
That makes a lot of sense. The fleeting nature of experiences forces us to be present, to savor those moments knowing they won't last forever. And the anticipation leading up to an experience is like a bonus layer of enjoyment.
He contrasts that with possessions which often lead to buyer's remorse or constant desire for more. That keeping up with the Joneses mentality can be a real happiness killer. Now let's talk about confidence.
I love it. But how does confidence connect to emotional intelligence?
Bradberry argues that true confidence stems from emotional intelligence. It's not about arrogance or bravado. It's about knowing yourself, understanding your emotions, and having the self-assurance to navigate challenges and setbacks effectively.
Right, it's about that inner strength and resilience that comes from knowing you can handle whatever life throws your way.
Exactly. And he outlines a bunch of habits that confident people tend to demonstrate.
Give me the goods. What are those confidence-boosting habits?
One is not being afraid to be wrong.
Wait, really? Wouldn't confident people want to be right all the time?
They might, but they also recognize that being wrong is a valuable learning opportunity. They're willing to put their opinions out there and see if they hold up, knowing they can learn from their mistakes.
So it's about embracing that growth mindset, seeing failure as feedback rather than a reflection of their worth.
Precisely. And they don't let being wrong damage their self-worth. They know what they're capable of and don't take it personally.
It's about having that inner confidence that's not dependent on external validation.
Another habit he mentions is celebrating other people's successes.
Interesting. Wouldn't confident people be more focused on their own achievements?
Confident people don't feel threatened by others' successes. They draw their self-worth from within so they can genuinely celebrate the accomplishments of those around them.
Okay, so it's about abundance mentality. Believing there's enough success to go around and not feeling the need to compete or tear others down.
He contrasts this with insecure people who constantly doubt their relevance and might try to steal the spotlight or criticize others to prove their worth.
So it's about focusing outward, seeing the value in others, and not letting insecurity drive your interactions.
Now let's talk about confident people's don'ts.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me what confident people avoid like the plague.
One big one is making excuses. They don't blame external circumstances for their failures or setbacks.
So it's about taking responsibility for your actions and choices, not playing the victim or passing the buck.
They have this belief in their own ability to make things happen. They have an internal locus of control, believing they have the power to shape their own destiny.
That's a powerful mindset. It's about feeling empowered to create the life you want, rather than feeling at the mercy of external forces.
Now let's move on to a concept that's closely related to confidence, mental strength.
Mental strength. I'm picturing those super disciplined folks who can withstand any challenge.
Bradberry dives into the work of Angela Duckworth, who popularized the concept of grit.
Grit. I've heard that term before.
Yeah.
Isn't it about perseverance, determination, that stick-to-itiveness that helps people achieve their long-term goals?
Exactly. Duckworth describes grit as a blend of passion, tenacity, and stamina. It's that ability to stay committed to your goals, even when faced with obstacles and setbacks.
And how does grit connect to emotional intelligence?
Bradberry argues that mental strength requires emotional intelligence. It involves understanding and managing your emotions effectively to stay motivated, focused, and resilient in the face of adversity.
Makes sense. It's like that emotional fuel that keeps you going when things get tough.
Yeah.
So what are some of the habits that mentally strong people demonstrate?
One is leading when no one else follows. They have the courage of their convictions and stay the course even when they don't have support from others.
That's powerful. It's about believing in yourself and your vision, even when others doubt you.
He also talks about exceeding expectations and meeting deadlines that seem unreasonable.
So it's about going above and beyond, pushing those limits and proving those doubters wrong.
They find a way to say yes and honor their commitments, even when it means putting in extra effort.
Right. It's about that commitment to excellence, not just settling for good enough.
And finally, they embrace discomfort and learn from mistakes. They don't shy away from challenges. They see them as opportunities for growth.
So it's about stepping outside that comfort zone, knowing that true growth happens when we're pushing our boundaries and challenging ourselves.
Now let's shift gears a bit and delve into something a little more sneaky.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What's up your sleeve?
Bradberry talks about spotting lies. He even throws in a statistic that people lie way more often than we think.
Wait, seriously? Everyone's walking around fibbing all the time. That's a little unsettling.
He goes into detail about specific body language cues that can betray deception.
Okay, give me the telltale signs of a liar. I'm ready to become a human lie detector.
One is mismatched words and body language, like when someone's telling a sad story but smiling or using animated gestures.
Ah, yes, that incongruence between what they're saying and how they're saying it. That's always a red flag. What else?
He also talks about changes in typical eye movement patterns. Some people look up and to the right when remembering information, but down when they're lying, while others do the opposite.
So you have to know their baseline eye behavior to spot the deception. Like if someone typically looks up when they're thinking, but suddenly they're looking down when answering a question, that could be a sign they're not being truthful.
Exactly. It's about noticing a deviation from their norm. He also points out that people who are lying often look toward the door like they're subconsciously planning their escape route.
That's a good one to watch out for. Okay, so let's say you catch someone in a lie. What's the best way to handle that?
Bradbury emphasizes keeping the conversation constructive. He suggests focusing on understanding why the person felt the need to lie, rather than simply accusing them or getting into a heated argument.
So it's about approaching the situation with empathy and curiosity, trying to get to the root of the issue. Because maybe they lied out of fear or insecurity, or maybe they were trying to protect someone.
He also talks about those situations where you suspect someone's lying, but you're not entirely sure.
Oh, those are the worst. It's like that nagging doubt in the back of your mind, but you don't want to come across as paranoid or accusatory.
He suggests maintaining a healthy dose of skepticism and carefully considering your options before confronting the person.
So it's about weighing the pros and cons of addressing the lie, directly telling someone else, or simply letting it go.
He emphasizes that each situation is unique and requires a thoughtful approach. Now let's dive into the world of mindset, specifically Carol Dweck's research on growth versus fixed mindset.
Ah, yes, the classic growth mindset. I've heard so much about it. Isn't it about believing that you can develop your abilities through effort and learning?
Exactly. Bradbury highlights Dweck's findings that people with a growth mindset tend to outperform those with a fixed mindset, even when they have a lower IQ.
Wait, really? So your attitude can trump your raw intelligence?
It can have a significant impact. People with a growth mindset see challenges as opportunities to learn and grow, while those with a fixed mindset see them as threats to their self-worth.
It's like that difference between saying, I can't do this versus I can't do this yet. That one little word yet makes all the difference.
He emphasizes that success often boils down to how you handle failure.
Failure. That dreaded F word.
People with a growth mindset view failure as information, a chance to learn and improve. They don't let it define them or derail their efforts.
Okay, I'm starting to see why the growth mindset is such a game changer. It's about resilience, adaptability, and that constant desire for growth. Now, Bradbury also makes this intriguing point about boosting your perceived intelligence, even if your IQ is fixed.
That's right. He cites research from Cornell showing that people are more likely to trust information presented with graphs.
Interesting. So it's not just about the information itself, but how you present it. Data visualization for the win.
He also advises avoiding phrases that make you sound less intelligent.
Ooh, I'm curious about this one. What are those intelligence sapping phrases we should avoid at all costs?
Well, one example he gives is, "You look tired." He argues that telling someone they look tired implies they're unattractive, have trouble concentrating, and are grouchy.
Oh, wow, you're right. That's a pretty loaded phrase.
Instead of saying you look tired, he suggests simply saying you look fantastic, which is a much more positive and supportive statement.
Good point. It's about choosing your words carefully to convey encouragement and respect rather than inadvertently criticizing or putting someone down. Now, Bradbury also delves into decision-making, particularly how to make good decisions when faced with uncertainty.
He cites research from the University of Texas showing how our brains can sabotage our decision-making.
Okay, I'm curious about this one. How do our brains lead us astray?
They tend to focus on vivid memories even when those memories are irrelevant to the decision at hand.
So it's like our emotions hijacking our logic.
Precisely. He gives the example of buying a car. Your brain might fixate on that memory of how amazing the leather seats felt in your friend's car, even though you know you can't afford that luxury.
Ah, yes, the allure of the shiny new thing.
Ah.
Our emotions tempting us to make irrational choices.
He argues that emotionally intelligent people are better at overriding those irrational tendencies and making sound decisions even when emotions run high.
So it's about that ability to step back, assess the situation objectively, and not let your feelings cloud your judgment. So what are some of the habits he recommends for managing uncertainty effectively?
One habit is embracing what you can't control.
Ooh, that's a tough one, especially for control freaks like myself.
He encourages readers to focus on the things they can control: their actions, their attitude, their effort, and let go of the rest.
Right, it's about surrendering to the things you can't change and channeling your energy into the things you can influence.
Yeah.
What else?
He also suggests focusing on the process, not just the outcome.
So it's about taking things one step at a time, enjoying the journey, and not getting too hung up on the destination. And this ties into another important point, which is seeking diverse perspectives.
Right. Exactly. Getting input from different people can help you see the situation from multiple angles and make a more informed decision. It's about challenging your own assumptions and being open to new information.
Now, he also dives into the fascinating world of cognitive biases. Those are those mental shortcuts that can sometimes lead us to make illogical or irrational decisions.
Yeah, exactly. They're like these hidden patterns in our thinking that can skew our perception and influence our behavior often without us realizing it.
So it's like our brains playing tricks on us, making us think we're being logical when we're actually being influenced by these subconscious biases.
Precisely. And he provides some great examples of common cognitive biases.
Okay, lay those biases on me. I'm ready to outsmart my own brain.
One classic bias is the halo effect.
Halo effect, like that glowing aura that makes someone seem more attractive or likable.
Exactly. He cites research that shows that we tend to perceive physically attractive people as being more competent and trustworthy.
So it's like we're judging a book by its cover, letting our initial impression of someone's appearance influence our overall judgment of their character. I'm definitely guilty of that one. I remember this one time.
We've all fallen prey to the halo effect at some point. It's a powerful bias. Another common bias is confirmation bias, which is the tendency to seek out information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs, even if that information is flawed or biased.
Ooh, I'm definitely guilty of this one too. It's so easy to get stuck in your own echo chamber and only listen to the voices that agree with you.
He emphasizes the importance of being open to challenging your own assumptions and seeking out information that might contradict your beliefs.
Right. It's
Yeah.
about being willing to be wrong and update your beliefs based on new evidence. What are some other cognitive biases he mentions?
He also talks about the planning fallacy, which is the tendency to underestimate how long it will take to complete a task.
Oh, I know this one all too well. I'm notorious for overestimating how much I can get done in a day.
He suggests breaking down tasks into smaller chunks and setting realistic deadlines to avoid falling into this trap.
Good advice. It's about being honest with yourself about your limitations and planning accordingly.
What else?
He also talks about the bandwagon effect, which is the tendency to follow the crowd even when it's not logical or in our best interest.
Ah, yes, the power of peer pressure. It's like that innate desire to fit in and conform, even if it means sacrificing our own judgment.
He encourages readers to think critically and not blindly follow the crowd, especially when making important decisions.
So it's about having the courage to stand out from the crowd and make choices that align with your own values and goals.
He also mentions cognitive dissonance, which is that discomfort we feel when our actions contradict our beliefs.
Right, like when you know something's wrong, but you do it anyway, and then you try to justify your behavior to reduce that inner tension.
He points out that cognitive dissonance can lead us to ignore our own ethical lapses or make excuses for bad behavior. So it's about being honest with ourselves, acknowledging our mistakes, and taking steps to align our actions with our values.
He also talks about the power of names.
Names, you mean what we call things.
Exactly. He argues that the labels we use can influence our perception and even our behavior.
So, like calling an unethical business practice financial engineering might make it seem less egregious.
Precisely. He encourages readers to be mindful of the language used to describe events and actions, as it can subtly shape our understanding and even our moral judgments.
So it's about being aware of the power of language and not letting labels or euphemisms distort our perception of reality. Now let's shift gears and talk about relationships.
Relationships are at the heart of emotional intelligence. Bradberry dives into the dynamics of healthy relationships, focusing on the importance of communication and conflict resolution.
Okay, because let's be real, conflicts are inevitable in any relationship. It's how you handle them that makes all the difference.
He identifies 4 communication patterns that can be detrimental to relationships. He calls them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Ooh, that sounds ominous. What are these relationship slaying patterns?
The first is criticism.
Criticism like attacking someone's character or personality, rather than addressing a specific behavior.
Exactly. He emphasizes the importance of focusing on the behavior that's bothering you, not making it a personal attack.
Right, it's about separating the person from the problem, addressing the issue without blaming or shaming.
The second horseman is contempt.
Contempt. That sounds pretty intense.
It is. He describes contempt as a form of disrespect and disgust, often conveyed through sarcasm, mockery, or eye-rolling.
Oh, I know those eye rolls. They speak volumes.
He argues that contempt is incredibly toxic to relationships and creates a climate of negativity and resentment.
Right, it's like that subtle poison that erodes trust and connection.
The third horseman is defensiveness.
Defensiveness, like
Yeah.
denying responsibility, making excuses, or deflecting blame.
Precisely. He points out that defensiveness prevents conflicts from being resolved, as it creates a barrier to open and honest communication.
It's like that wall goes up and you're no longer willing to listen or consider the other person's perspective.
Exactly. And finally, the fourth horseman is stonewalling.
Stonewalling. That sounds like the ultimate shutdown.
It is. He describes stonewalling as withdrawing from the conversation, shutting down emotionally, and refusing to engage.
So it's like that silent treatment where you're physically present but emotionally checked out.
Precisely. He emphasizes that these four communication patterns are highly destructive to relationships and can lead to a breakdown in connection and trust.
Okay, so those are the four horsemen we need to avoid at all costs: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. What I find fascinating is how subtle these patterns can be. It's not always about yelling and screaming. Sometimes it's those seemingly small things like an eye roll or a sarcastic remark that can chip away at the foundation of a relationship.
You're absolutely right. It's often those subtle, nonverbal cues that speak volumes, and that's why emotional intelligence is so crucial in relationships. It's about being aware of not just our own emotions, but also the emotions of the other person, and being able to communicate in a way that fosters understanding and connection even when there's conflict.
So how do we replace those negative patterns with more constructive communication habits? Let's talk strategy.
One of the first things Bradbury suggests is taking a break if emotions are running high. Instead of trying to force a resolution when you're both feeling angry or frustrated, step away from the conversation for a bit.
It's like hitting that pause button before things escalate into a full-blown argument. Give each other space to calm down, process those emotions, and come back to the conversation with a clearer head.
Exactly. He also talks about the importance of active listening, which we discussed earlier in the context of likability. It's about going beyond just hearing the words. It's
Yeah.
about really trying to understand the other person's perspective.
It's about paying attention to their body language, their tone of voice, their underlying emotions. It's about showing that you genuinely care about what they're saying, even if you don't agree with them.
And one practical tip he offers for active listening is to reflect back what you're hearing. So you might say, what I'm hearing you say is, or it sounds like you're feeling, it shows the other person that you're really trying to understand their point of view.
It's a powerful way to validate their feelings and create that sense of empathy and understanding. What other communication tips does Bradbury offer?
He also suggests using I statements instead of you statements. So instead of saying, you always do this or you never do that, which can sound accusatory, you'd say, I feel hurt when, or I need.
That's a great point. I statements focus on your own feelings and needs without blaming or attacking the other person. It's about taking ownership of your experience and communicating it in a way that's assertive but not aggressive.
And it invites the other person to respond in kind to share their own feelings and needs rather than getting defensive.
It's about creating that safe space for open and honest dialogue where both people feel heard and respected. Now, Bradbury also provides a three-step process for repairing a damaged relationship. Tell me more about that.
The first step is taking your emotions out of the driver's seat.
So it's about calming down, regulating your emotions, and not letting them hijack the conversation.
Exactly. He emphasizes the importance of understanding your own emotions before you can effectively communicate with the other person. It's like that oxygen mask on an airplane analogy. You have to put on your own mask first before you can help anyone else.
Because if you're all riled up and reactive, you're not going to be able to have a productive conversation. You're just going to be throwing those emotional grenades back and forth.
The second step is understanding the other party's perspective.
So putting yourself in their shoes, trying to see the situation from their point of view. That can be a really challenging step, especially if you feel like you've been wronged.
It is, but it's crucial for rebuilding trust and connection. It's about recognizing that their perspective is valid even if it's different from yours.
It's about letting go of that need to be right and focusing instead on understanding where the other person is coming from. And that brings us to the third step, which is making a repair.
Exactly. He emphasizes that an effective repair should show respect for the other person, convey concern for their perspective, find common ground, and be neutral in tone.
So it could be an apology, an act of kindness, a gesture of reconciliation. It's about taking those concrete steps to demonstrate that you're committed to mending the relationship.
He acknowledges that not all repairs will be successful, but the key is to keep trying and to learn from your mistakes.
It's about that willingness to be vulnerable, to put yourself out there, and to keep showing up for the relationship, even when it's difficult. Now, Bradbury also offers some great advice for parents who want to teach their children emotional intelligence. I'm really curious about this because I think a lot of parents struggle with how to equip their kids with these essential skills.
One of the key things he emphasizes is allowing children to experience risk and failure.
I can see why that would be tough for some parents. We want to protect our kids from pain and disappointment.
Of course. But he argues that by shielding children from failure, we're actually preventing them from developing resilience and learning how to cope with setbacks.
That makes sense. It's like that saying, smooth seas don't make skillful sailors. We need those challenges to grow and develop our strength and resilience.
He also talks about encouraging children to label their emotions, helping them develop that emotional vocabulary we discussed earlier.
So instead of just saying, I'm sad,
Yeah,
they can learn to say, I'm frustrated, or I'm disappointed, or I'm feeling left out. It gives them more precision in expressing their feelings, which can be so helpful for both understanding and managing those emotions.
exactly. When children can identify and express their emotions clearly, they're better equipped to communicate their needs and navigate those tricky social situations.
It's like giving them the tools to understand and navigate their own inner world, which is such a gift. Now let's shift gears again and talk about leadership. I'm always eager to learn about the intersection of leadership and emotional intelligence.
Bradberry emphasizes that effective leadership requires a balance of focusing on results and focusing on people.
That resonates with me. It's not about choosing one or the other. It's about finding that sweet spot where you're driving performance while also creating a positive and supportive work environment where people feel valued and respected.
He cites research showing that leaders who prioritize both results and people are perceived as great leaders a whopping 72% of the time.
That's a powerful statistic. It really highlights the importance of finding that balance.
He then delves into the communication habits of great leaders.
Okay, because communication is key in any leadership role.
Absolutely. One habit he highlights is honesty.
Honesty, you mean being straightforward and transparent even when it's difficult?
Precisely. Great leaders don't sugarcoat things or try to spin the truth. They build trust by being upfront and authentic, even when delivering bad news.
Because trying to hide the truth or downplay a problem only erodes trust in the long run. People see right through that. What other communication habits do great leaders demonstrate?
Authenticity is another big one. They're not trying to fit into some preconceived mold of what a leader should be. They lead from a place of genuine integrity, letting their values and beliefs guide their actions.
It's about being true to yourself, not putting on a facade or trying to be someone you're not, because people can spot a fake a mile away.
He also emphasizes the importance of active listening, which we've already talked about in other contexts, but it's worth repeating here.
Right. It's about truly listening to your team, understanding their concerns, and valuing their input. And I think that ties into another important leadership quality, which is appreciating potential.
Exactly. Great leaders are able to see the best in people even when they might not see it in themselves. They recognize the unique talents and abilities of each team member and create opportunities for them to grow and develop.
So it's about being a mentor, a coach, a champion for your team. It's about fostering that growth mindset within your team, empowering people to reach their full potential.
Now let's switch gears one last time and talk about productivity.
Productivity. The holy grail of getting things done.
Yeah.
I'm always up for tips and tricks to maximize my output. What does Bradberry have to say about boosting productivity?
He offers a bunch of practical strategies, starting with managing interruptions effectively.
Interruptions, those pesky little things that derail our focus and throw us off track.
Yeah.
Tell me he has some solutions for combating those productivity killers.
He emphasizes the importance of creating a distraction-free work environment.
So turning off those notifications, silencing your phone, and finding a quiet space where you can truly focus, and maybe putting a do not disturb sign on your door.
Exactly. He also talks about the importance of time blocking.
Time blocking. You mean scheduling specific chunks of time for different tasks?
Precisely. It's about allocating dedicated time slots for focused work meetings, email, and other activities. This way, you're not constantly switching gears and losing momentum.
It's about creating that structure and intentionality in your day, so you're not just reacting to whatever comes up.
Yeah.
What other productivity hacks does he recommend?
He also suggests tackling your most challenging tasks during your peak productivity hours.
That makes sense. We all have those times a day when our brains are firing on all cylinders, right?
Exactly. For some people, it's first thing in the morning. For others, it might be late at night. The key is to identify your own peak productivity window and schedule your most demanding tasks accordingly.
So it's about working with your natural energy rhythms to maximize your output. And I bet he also talks about the importance of taking breaks, right?
He does. He cites research showing that taking regular breaks can actually boost productivity. He specifically mentions the 52.1 SEV rule.
The 52.1 Sembro rule, I've never heard of that.
It's based on a study by the Drogium Group, which found that the most productive employees worked for 52 minutes, followed by a 17-minute break.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So it's not about pushing yourself to work nonstop. It's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that our brains need those periods of rest and recovery to function optimally.
So what should we be doing during those 17-minute breaks? Scrolling through social media, catching up on email.
He suggests activities that actually help you detach from work and recharge your mental batteries.
So going for a walk, listening to music, meditating, or even just chatting with a coworker about something other than work.
Exactly. The key is to step away from the screen and engage in something that helps you relax and rejuvenate.
What other productivity tips does he offer?
He highlights the importance of having a great morning routine.
Nah, morning routines. I'm a sucker for a good morning routine. What are some of the things he recommends?
He suggests starting the day with exercise, eating a healthy breakfast, and practicing mindfulness.
Those are all great ways to set yourself up for a productive and positive day. Now let's talk about career advancement. Who doesn't want to climb that ladder and achieve their professional goals?
Bradberry outlines a seven-step process for getting promoted and earning more money, and he emphasizes the role of emotional intelligence in career success.
Okay, I'm ready to take notes on this one. What are those 7 steps?
One key step is learning about your industry. He encourages readers to go beyond their basic job skills and really understand the bigger picture, the trends, the challenges, and the opportunities.
It's about being knowledgeable and insightful about your field, not just competent in your specific role.
Exactly. He also talks about being proactive, solving problems, and taking initiative without being asked.
So it's about going above and beyond, demonstrating that you're a valuable asset to the company.
And he emphasizes the importance of demonstrating leadership potential, staying calm and collected during crises, and showing that you can handle pressure effectively.
Those are the qualities that make people stand out as leadership material. It's about being that go-to person, the one who can be counted on to handle tough situations with grace and competence.
Now, in addition to those positive steps, he also provides a list of career-killing mistakes to avoid.
Ooh, okay, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
I definitely want to make sure I'm not accidentally sabotaging my career. What are some of the big no-nos?
One big one is complaining nonstop.
Complaining, you mean like constantly venting about your job, your boss, your coworkers?
Exactly. He argues that chronic complaining damages morale, creates negativity, and erodes relationships.
It's like that emotional contagion spreading negativity and toxicity throughout the workplace, and no one wants to be around that.
Another mistake he mentions is being a know-it-all.
Ah, yes. Those folks who think they have all the answers and are always right. Not exactly the most endearing quality.
He points out that this arrogance can be a major turnoff and prevent people from wanting to collaborate or share ideas.
Right, it's about being open to learning from others, recognizing that you don't have a monopoly on knowledge. What other career-killing mistakes does he mention?
He also warns against sucking up to the boss.
Sucking up, like trying to get ahead by flattery and insincerity.
Exactly. He argues that this erodes trust and creates resentment among coworkers.
It's about building genuine relationships based on mutual respect, not trying to manipulate your way to the top.
Now let's circle back to a concept we touched on earlier, mindfulness.
Mindfulness, that practice of being present and aware of our thoughts, feelings, and sensations. I'm ready to hear how mindfulness can enhance our EQ.
Bradberry presents mindfulness as a simple but powerful tool for boosting emotional intelligence.
I could see how it would help with self-awareness, which is a foundational element of EQ. But what about the other aspects of emotional intelligence?
He argues that mindfulness helps us regulate our emotions more effectively. By being present and aware of our feelings, we're less likely to be swept away by them or react impulsively.
So instead of just reacting to a stressful situation, we can take a moment to observe our thoughts and feelings, choose a more constructive response, and avoid that knee-jerk reaction.
Exactly. He also talks about how mindfulness fosters compassion both for ourselves and for others.
That makes sense. When we're more aware of our own emotions and struggles, we're more likely to be understanding and compassionate toward others.
And he also talks about the importance of breaking bad habits.
Bad habits, those pesky little things that hold us back from reaching our full potential. What are some of the worst offenders he mentions?
He quotes Warren Buffett, who said, "Chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken."
That's a powerful quote.
Yeah.
It really captures the insidious nature of bad habits.
Yeah.
They sneak up on us, and before we know it, we're trapped in their grip.
One habit he highlights is impulsively surfing the internet.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that one. It's like that black hole of distraction. You start out with a clear intention, and then the next thing you know, you're down a rabbit hole of social media or online shopping, and hours have gone by.
He argues that these impulsive internet detours break our flow state and make it much harder to get back on track.
It's like that constant mental switching gears that drains our energy and focus.
He also talks about the dangers of multitasking.
I'm curious about this one because I think a lot of people believe that multitasking is the key to getting more done in less time.
But he actually argues that multitasking is a myth. Our brains can only focus on one thing at a time, so when we try to do multiple things simultaneously, we're actually just switching our attention back and forth rapidly.
So instead of doing several things poorly, we should focus on doing one thing well.
Exactly. And research has shown that multitasking actually decreases efficiency, increases errors, and can even temporarily lower your IQ.
Wow, I'm officially convinced multitasking is the enemy of productivity.
He also talks about the perils of perfectionism.
This is an interesting one. Isn't striving for excellence a good thing?
It is, but he distinguishes between healthy striving and unhealthy perfectionism. He argues that perfectionism can lead to procrastination, fear of failure, and a constant feeling of inadequacy. It's about setting unrealistic standards and then beating yourself up when you inevitably fall short.
So it's about finding that balance between striving for excellence and being kind to yourself.
Exactly. And recognizing that mistakes are a part of the process.
Now, before we wrap things up, I'd love to hear what Bradberry has to say about personality types.
He talks about the classic type A versus type B personalities.
Ah, yes, the go-getters versus the laid-back folks.
He describes type A personalities as ambitious, competitive, and often prone to stress,
Always striving to achieve, always pushing the limits.
while type B personalities tend to be more relaxed, easygoing, and less driven by external pressures.
So it's about those different approaches to work life and everything in between. Are there any other personality types he mentions?
He also talks about ambiverts, those who fall somewhere in between introversion and extroversion.
The ambiverts, the best of both worlds.
Exactly. They can thrive in social situations, but they also value their alone time. He encourages readers to understand their own personality type and how it influences their emotional intelligence and their interactions with others.
Okay, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive. From understanding the neuroscience of emotions, to navigating toxic relationships, to mastering happiness habits and boosting productivity, we've explored a wide range of topics related to emotional intelligence.
And one of the key takeaways for me is that emotional intelligence is not some fixed trait. It's a set of skills that we can develop and hone over time, just like any other skill.
Exactly. It's about that ongoing journey of self-discovery and growth. Now, I know we've covered a lot of Bradberry's key insights, but I'm curious, what are some of the things he doesn't address that you think are important for understanding emotional intelligence?
That's a great question. And it's something to think about as we move into the final part of our deep dive.
That is a great question to ponder. What are some of the blind spots when it comes to emotional intelligence? I'm ready to go even deeper into this topic.
One area that I think is often overlooked is the role of culture. Bradbury touches on it briefly, but I think it deserves more attention. Our cultural background shapes our values, beliefs, and even our emotional expression. What might be considered emotionally intelligent in one culture could be perceived very differently in another.
That's a really important point. It's like that saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. But it's not just about outward behavior. It's about understanding the underlying cultural norms and values that shape people's emotional responses. So, for example, in some cultures, expressing anger openly is considered taboo, while in other cultures, it's seen as a healthy way to assert yourself.
Exactly. And if you're not aware of these cultural nuances, you can easily misinterpret someone's emotions or intentions. You might perceive someone as being cold or distant when in reality they're just adhering to the social norms of their culture.
It's like that classic example of eye contact. In some cultures, direct eye contact is a sign of respect and engagement, while in other cultures, it can be seen as aggressive or confrontational.
Exactly. So if you're interacting with someone from a different culture, it's crucial to be aware of these differences and to adjust your communication style accordingly. It's about being culturally sensitive and respectful.
And I think that ties into another aspect of emotional intelligence that's often overlooked, which is the importance of self-care. We can't be emotionally intelligent if we're running on empty. We need to take care of our own physical and mental well-being in order to show up as our best selves for others.
Absolutely. Bradbury talks about stress management and the importance of sleep, but I think it's important to expand on that and include other aspects of self-care, like exercise, healthy eating, spending time in nature, pursuing hobbies, and connecting with loved ones.
It's about recognizing that self-care is not selfish. It's essential.
Hmm.
It's like that oxygen mask analogy again. You have
Yeah.
to take care of yourself first before you can effectively care for others.
Yeah.
Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring it back to you, the listener. We've explored a lot of insights and strategies from emotional intelligence habits, but ultimately it's up to you to decide how you want to apply this knowledge to your own life.
And that's the beauty of emotional intelligence. It's a journey of self-discovery. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. It's about experimenting, reflecting, and finding what works best for you.
Exactly. So as you go forward, I encourage you to ask yourself, what resonated with me most from this deep dive? What one small change can I make today to boost my EQ and create a more fulfilling life?
Remember, emotional intelligence is a lifelong practice. We're more compassionate and more connected to both yourself and the people around you.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of emotional intelligence. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and are inspired to continue exploring the power of EQ in your own life.